Right, morning,
To
morning.
myself,
Welcome.
wasn't
No, you must keep quiet. Mute yourself. Come on, what's going on here? No, you guys have just got no control and no manners in the situation. So this is what Wisdoms is all about. It's good fun. It's interesting stories. It's inspiring stories, and it's personal stories. So this morning we've convinced Trevor Carty, the man dressed up in the Springbok jersey there this morning, to tell us at least the beginning of his story. So I think with no further ado, Trevor, I'm just going to hand over to you to take it away. So thanks so much, and we're looking forward to your story this morning.
Thanks, Ivan. Morning all, and first things first, happy Heritage Day. So whichever cultural wealth part of our nation you are, I just welcome you this morning to Wisdoms. One of the things that Wisdoms is all about is acceptance of others and teams and groups, so welcome. Yeah, thanks for the invite to come and chat this morning, guys. And you know, it goes back to a student at the Teachers College of Johannesburg, and a very rowdy salesman in the office automation space. Please don't think Apple, Samsung, Nokia. Think Olivetti and think typewriter. And that was my father. He was a rugby player, and he was involved in the game. He played for Western Transvaal, and they came to play against the Teachers College. And there was this young beauty on the side of the field. And needless to say, a couple of years of courting, buying a plot and starting to build a home in Bryanston, and my mother was pregnant. And my father was a traveling salesman, and my mother was deeply pregnant in the late part of the month of May of 1966. And my father had to go and make some deliveries in the West Rand, far West Rand of Klerksdorp. And he had a lot of deliveries. So he said to my mother, I can't leave you at the new house with no communications. You're going to be a road tripper. And off we went. Needless to say, her water broke and in Klerksdorp. And so she was quickly admitted to the Klerksdorp hospital. And my father went down to go and get the bag out the car. And he obviously opened the boot, and one of the locals obviously saw that there was some very fine merchandise in the boot. And he came back, and as he was walking up to my mom's room, so this individual was trying to break into the car. And by the time my dad got to the room, my mother was in labor, about 4 centimeters dilated. She said, John, there's a guy breaking into your car. And he just turned around, he ran downstairs, and here was this individual leaning against the pole. And he was looking around and couldn't see anyone. My mother shouted at the window, it's him! And my dad turned to the guy, and the guy looked at my father. My father was a big guy. He was 6'3". He was a lock. And he just bolted. Unluckily for him, he ran in front of a truck. And he got killed. And so my father had to go and report this incident. And that's where I got my name from. I'm meant to be Grant Carty. But the accident happened on the corner of Trevor and Hospital Street in Klerksdorp. And my father came back and said to my mother, after I was delivered, there is no way this is a Grant, this is a Trevor. So that was 66. Fast forward, 3 days later, I was back in Bryanston. We grew up in Carly Road in days of dirt and dust. Don't know if you can remember draatheining. If we had any fences, we had draatheinings. And we grew up with the Goldies and the humans and the hunters, and the humans were across the road. They were in the poor side of the district. They were in Paulshof / Peter Vale, while Carly Road demarcated the start of Bryanston. And my father had spent a long time looking for this piece of real estate, because on the other side of us, which wasn't Carly Road, was going to be a new school. It was going to be a primary school and a high school. And obviously the thoughts were that my mom would teach there and that I'd just pop across to school every day. So fast forward again, even in those days, not everything the government did came to fruition. Didn't become a school. The land still lies fallow, zoned as a school today. And I ended up going to Bryanston Primary, followed by Bryanston High. And we did move next door to the school in our high school years. So I did get that chance to climb the fence and go to school every day. I only took books for that first 3 periods. Then I went home for the 10 o'clock break, grabbed my books for the next period, went o'clock home for my 12 o'clock break. And so it was. And then miraculously, I managed to get a matric that allowed me to go to university. And I said to my father, well, that's me, I'm off to the army. And he said, no. You're the third smallest chap in your school. You're not going to be the smallest chap in the army. In those days, we were fighting quite a significant war. Funny that we can talk about this on Heritage Day, our stories of our past and our history. And so he convinced me that I should go and register for a degree at Wits. So I got on my bicycle and I cycled from our house in Bryanston to Wits. And they had an open day. And I thought, well, that's it. Bachelor of Arts is what I'll do. And I signed up for a Bachelor of Arts. And I started a conversation with a couple of people there that were giving out bursaries. And I got home and at dinner that night, I said to my father, well, that's it. I think I might have a bursary and I'm going to start a degree. He said, son, that's fantastic. He said, what are you going to study? I said, I'm going to do a Bachelor of Arts. And that's where I got this slight cut above my eye from. Never tell your father that you're going to do an arts degree if he doesn't have much respect for the arts. So he said to me, son, when that bleeding stops tomorrow, you get on your bicycle and you go back to Wits and you register for some real degree. He says, the fact that I'm not paying for it's immaterial, and then you better sort out who is going to pay for it at the same time. So I went back, it was open week, and I registered for a Bachelor of Science. Then it was very easy to get a bursary. The guy at the bursary table said to me, if you do maths, physics, chemistry in your first year, we will give you a bursary and we'll pay for your degree. I said, wow, that's incredible. What's the catch? He says, well, you've got to do a second degree. I said, okay, and who's going to pay for that? And I said, no, we'll pay for that. I said, okay, that also sounds too good to be true. So I said, what is the second degree? I said, no, you're going to become a teacher. I said, wow. I said, my mother will be very proud of me and she won't hit me when I get home tonight. So let's sign up for this 2 double headers. And cycled back home that day and I felt quite good. And it's amazing how quickly you can heal when things like this are going on. So the scarring's actually gone. And dinner that night, I proudly announced that I was signed up for a Bachelor of Science and that I was going to follow that up with a higher diploma in education, and that I wouldn't be taking any of the family fortune, which we had not yet found, because I was going to be Uncle Ted's pride and joy for 4 years. And my father said to me, who's this Ted guy? He's not sure he likes him. I said, Dad, it's the Transvaal Education Department. He said, we know him well. He gives us a contribution every month to your mother's budget. Because at that stage, my mother was teaching in Rivonia. And so that was great. I cycled backwards and forwards to Wits for the next couple of years. But what no one told me is that if you're going to do a Bachelor of Science, and in your first year, you're going to do physics and chemistry, you really shouldn't have done German for matric. You should have taken biology. So I was battling, that's probably the soft way of saying it, but I was really cucking off. And I had to get extra lessons. And the ACT said to me, listen, the only way for you to do this is to go back and do standard 8, 9, and 10 biology in this first semester. And for us to then try and teach you and catch up in the second semester and then see how we go. Well, I've got to tell you, it's not possible. The upside is I did meet Nadine and Renee and a couple of other German speakers in my 8, 9, and 10 class. And I was able on my honeymoon when we were in Deutschland to take control from my Italian wife and speak the language while she spoke Italian and the rest of the continent. Yeah, so that was it. I ended up getting a Bachelor of Science. I got my higher diploma in education, and I found some growth spurts. At school, I was really tiny, and I wasn't really rugby material, but I was a great squash player. So I concentrated on squash. I wanted to get 2 awards, and I managed to get that. I got the squash trophy most years, and I got, every time you got a hiding or a caning from your headmaster, who used to wear ties, and we'd pull a thread out of the tie. And in matric, the headmaster called me in about the beginning of the 3rd quarter, and he said, "Carty, you go and get a new tie at McCulloch and Bothwell this afternoon." I said, "Why is that, sir?" He said, "Well, you've lost this much of your tie to Jacks this year, and you've still got half a year to go." I said, "Sir, we're very poor and I can't afford a tie." So the second thing that I got was that year's most caned matriculant. It was helped by the scandal when our hair touched our ears. Don't know if you remember that. It's in the Guinness Book of Records, where every child in the school, every male child in the school got 2 Jacks because their hair was too long, under Principal Fisser and Deputy Principal Campbell. Boys, you are maniacs. I loved catching up with them at our 30th reunion because they let me give them each 2 Jacks. So whoever says teachers don't have a sense of humor. And then there was Viviers, and Viviers said to me, "Carty, you're going to be a teacher." And I said to him, "Not likely." Particularly when I was hanging over the balcony upside down, a guy called Jamie Bartlett, who's a well-known and recognized South African actor today. And this was from the 3rd floor, and Fisser came and he said, "Bartlett, put that boy down." And I thought, dear Jesus, do not let him let me go now. Let him first bring me over the railing and put me alongside the classroom. So yeah, so while I was in university, I started bulking up a little bit. Started finding that great beverage called beer, and I ended up picking a couple of kilograms. And as we started moving towards the mid-late 80s, all of a sudden I wasn't getting call-ups to places that would take me naturally to the border. And my younger brother, he had been unsuccessful a couple of years at Wits in different disciplines, and he'd found himself on the border, and he'd been regaling some stories, which, when my parents weren't too keen that they had 2 people up there. So finally, when you get your diploma, you are sent as potential officers material to Oudtshoorn, and you go and learn to be an infantry lieutenant. So you go straight into the cannon fodder space, and Oudtshoorn was fantastic, because when I got there, I decided that I had forgotten how to speak Afrikaans. I had also decided that I had a new salute, and the salute looked like that. And this salute really was going to be something that Afrikaans majors and Afrikaans sergeant majors and lieutenants and corporals were always going to have a problem with. And then when they spoke to me, I didn't understand a word they were speaking. So it was great fun. And on the very first day, my luitenant in Corporaal het vir my gesê, "Engelsman, ons sien jy's vol kak, en ons het vir jou 2 clues on how to get out of here alive." I said, "That's fantastic. What are those clues?" They said, "The first is, do you play sport?" I said, "I play Transvaal squash." They said, "That's lekker. You will play defense squash." I said, "Anything else you can tell us?" I said, "No." They said, "You need to sing in the choir." So I said, "What? Are you mad?" I said, "Look, I was quite musical. My mother is a music specialist, and I'm a grade 8 pianist. So I can play instruments, but my singing voice not so great." And he said to me, "Engelsman, jy's in die fucking koor. Hoor jy my?" I said, "Yes, Lieutenant." And that Tuesday night, they called all the guys together, and they said, "Who plays sport?" I put my hand up. We all stood forward. We went to Bravo Company, which was the sports company, I got into the bungalow with all the squash players. And then on the Thursday, when we had our first parade, they said, wie sing in die koor, wie het 'n stem? I said to my lieutenant, is this what he's talking about? He says, this is the one. So I stepped forward. I said, me. And I went for this interview to be in the choir. And I knew what the outcome was going to be. And the outcome was going to be that they weren't going to keep me. But they hadn't cut our hair yet. And I'd grown my hair quite long. It was off my shoulder, looked a bit like Kabous Potgieter. You might remember him, Trevor, now. And in between my first audition and my second audition, I had my hair cut. So I went back in the second time looking a bit like this, less the beard. And the guy said, you got something, but you look like someone I've already heard. And I don't really know if we got space, all in Afrikaans, nationally, with a little bit of one of these touches. And I said to him, well, I've been told that I'm in this choir, and if you've got a problem with it, you need to talk to this lieutenant. And this. Oh, no, okay, you're that case, they said to me. We understand. He said, what you've got to do, and this is long before the great Milli Vanilli, is I just had to stand there and go, and obviously I wasn't going to do that either, was I? So needless to say. So between squash and choir, they were quite right. My military service and training to be a lieutenant in Oudtshoorn was magnificent. What I didn't know was that two things were going to happen in that year to give me a further break. The first was that my brother was going to turn 21 now in September. So his birthday is on the 17th. So I didn't know that I was going to have my wisdom teeth pulled out. There you go. That's why I have no wisdom left and have to join a group like this. And that would give me 7 days off to come and join my brother for his 21st birthday celebration. But the second is that you actually graduate from these degrees that you get. And the colonel called me in, and Oudtshoorn is known as one of the toughest fussbait in the world. It's 4 days of 90 kilometers, full webbing kit, carry all your food, and you train for months. And I was looking lean, mean, and fighting machine. And the colonel called me in and he said to me, how's things going? And I first greeted him. He nearly had a cadenza. Then when he had to speak English to me, it was quite interesting. I had to say to him, Colonel, why don't you speak Afrikaans and just understand? I'll respond in English, because I do understand it. I just can't talk it. It's a bit like Google Translate, you know. And the next thing that happened is he says to me, are you ready for fussbait? I said, I've never been more ready for fussbait. He says, I've heard from your lieutenant and your corporal that you're going to handle this in your stride. I said, I've never done anything and put my mind to it like this thing. It's going to be, I'm going to come out as one of the top guys here. It's all about leadership, blah, blah, fish-based. He said, you're not going to do it. And I thought, okay, my mother's died or my father's died. I said, and why is that? He says, there are 3 days in a man's life that are critically important and that you should not ever miss. And I thought, okay, burying your father or your mother's one of them. He says, one of them is the day you get married. Don't not arrive on that day. It's not good style and it sets the platform wrong. So I thought, okay, check that box. I'm not planning that for a while, but that makes good sense. He says, the second thing is, if you get blessed with children, make sure that you are at the delivery of those children. He says, because you will meet God right there. I said, yeah. And he said, and by the way, God is a woman and it's your wife. I said, okay, that's quite heavy. And now I'm thinking, okay, now he's going to give me the bury your mother and bury your father thing. And he says, the third thing is, if you've been fortunate enough to have half a brain, have found some money, and to graduate. And I thought, okay, here we go. He says, so you're not going to fussbait. You're going to go back to Johannesburg and you're going to Wits University and you're going to graduate. I said to him, it's not happening. I'm staying right here. You know, one of those good cop, bad cop things. And finally he said to me, okay, you know what? It's actually time for you to go. We've got 3 days of prep before we walk left. It's a 4-day walk, and there's after that a week that people can't walk. So you're away for 2 weeks. go and enjoy your graduation and come back and show me a photograph. So yeah, so my army days were great. As a teacher, you also pick up a salary when you're in the army. So not only do you get a troop salary, which then becomes a lieutenant salary, but you have this nice, because it's part of working off your commitment to the state, you see, and it was contractual, 2 years. So I only had to then teach for 2 years after that, and I was going to teach at Bryanston High, so everything was quite sweet. The problem was we had this chap that was looking for a Nobel Peace Prize. His name was F.W. de Klerk. And someone had said to him, you know what, Evia, if we let this oak out of jail and we start something, maybe we can get you and him together and we'll get you both a Nobel Peace Prize or something like that. Well, needless to say, when you put something like that together, you need money as a government. And the first place they thought they'd get money was from us teachers. And what that meant is they said, we're not going to do 2 years of national service anymore. We are only going to do 18 months. Because then they had that extra 6 months where they're not paying us lieutenants' pay, danger pay, I mean, our teachers' salaries. And they now had money for Cadessa, and they could fund a guy called Rolf Meyer, who led the National Party, and a guy called Cyril Ramaphosa, who was the head of Cadessa. And they were going to strategize and pay these individuals to work out how to bring South Africa into the state of a rainbow nation so that we could celebrate things like Heritage Day some years later. And that was the start of a change in my life, because I was quite happy. I'd been moved to 121 Battalion. I was the 2IC. I looked after the camp when the permanent force guys left to go back to Pretoria at 3 o'clock. I took over. We started the braais. By 4 o'clock, my 400 troops could buy boerewors rolls and a Coke. And by 5 o'clock, we had gone into the officers' mess to have a couple of light beverages and refreshments. And little did I know, all my troops had left to go and visit the neighboring villages. What was quite lekker is I looked after a game farm there for King Mashlangu. And it was part of my responsibility, and it was some of the great 6 months that I had in North Pretoria looking after this National Heritage Game Reserve for King Mashlangu, which many years later comes around. So let's jump out of the army. I go and get a temporary teaching post. Problem is, I'd now bought myself a house. I'd put a tenant in the house. I'd got a government bond. And all of a sudden, because I'm not a permanent employee, I lose my teaching salary. I lose my subsidy. I lose my bucks from my Cokes and boerewors rolls. And it was a disaster. And then I had to go and teach at Queen's College in Kensington. Disasters don't get bigger than that. And I walked in there, and the first day when I came home, I said to my father, you got me in this, you get me out of this. And he said, well, you know, your brother hasn't managed to get much in the way of education, but look at him. He's 23 and he's on top of his game at Liberty Life. And, you know, my father at that stage had left Olivetti. He had pinnacled out there as the managing director, and he decided he wanted to do a couple of different things. And now he had been about 15 years at Liberty. And he said, boy, I can get you a job in the financial services space. So I said, I don't care where it is. As long as I get more than $806, I'm in. And I don't have to drive to Kensington and teach those unruly mob. So I went for an interview the next day with a guy called Hilton Sachs. And on the Friday, I picked up my new car. I drove to school. I resigned. And then I drove to Swaziland for my first conference with Liberty Life. Ended up doing some stuff there. Moved from the field where we were servicing the brokers to the head office, where we started doing some product development. We did product development predominantly around wealth creation products and healthcare products. And we had these two young actuaries, Barry Schwartzberg and Adrian Gore, and they had some great ideas. And we put together a product called Medical Lifestyle with a very long-term rollout. And our brokers sold this product flat out. Next thing, it was time to move because the actuaries had left to start their own business. And I had met this Italian woman, and she had told me I'm a narrow-minded Dutchman, and that the only way you can cure that is to travel the world. So off we went. We got married in the May, 4 days after we inaugurated our president, and we then left to travel the world for 7 months. Fast Track came back, opened my own brokerage. July this year was 30 years of being an independent broker and running my own brokerages. The timeline's been quite great. I was an early adapter, having had a license to shoot people out of trees, and then having given up my income to fund Cadessa, and I ended up being an early adapter of BEE and ended up doing a couple of BEE transactions. And the one that really put me kind of on the map was the Old Mutual one for a guy called Bulelani Nuka, whose wife was our deputy president, and we had a lot of fun in the 2000s. Then we had obviously 2010 World Cup. By now I'd been developing things like Cosmo City. My brother and I had carved up my dad's property where we grew up, and my brother actually did all the development work. I just got the good fortune of naming the road after my firstborn child. I'd now had 4 children, and I didn't know I could get a grant if I wasn't employed for children. Otherwise, I would have been able to tap the government again, but I went to do it the other way. And so 2010 World Cup came along. I had been building alternative houses on a plot of mine in Kaya Sands, and we decided to turn that into a 2010 village. What a disaster. Fast forward 2011, I was put out to pasture. 2012, I got divorced. And 2013, the woman who did my divorce, I was quite keen on her. And I asked her if she'd like to move with me to the Eastern Cape, because when I'd made some money with Bulelani, I had bought some beachfront property, 200 hectares with some partners, and I always wanted to build a golf course, and got involved with St. Francis Links, and I saw my boots. So at this stage, I'd now worked out I wasn't God, and I found a bit more of God, and I'd asked God, what do I do with this land? And he said, well, after all, it is my land. You're not going to stay here. Go make it a nature reserve and do something environmentally correct. So I took this very sexy lawyer who had got me divorced, and we went and lived in the Eastern Cape. And one day we were driving to Plet, and a little voice said to me, it's time. And I thought, it's time. What was it? And the voice then said, for cake. And I didn't know that what the voice was talking about was wedding cake. And so I said to Bridget, I said, babe, if I asked you to marry me, would you marry me? And she said to me, yeah. I said, well, are you going to phone your mother and tell her you're getting married? She said, no, that's not a proposal. He said, you propose, you bend down on one knee, there's a big bunch of flowers, and there's witnesses. So there's that beautiful little cafe at the Tsitsikamma Forest. And I said to her, just pop in and go and get us 2 Cokes, because outside was the most magnificent, you could buy flowers and go. And I went and I bought this thing of proteas. I couldn't put my hands around it. And when she came to pay for the 2 Cokes, there I was at the till with the only other individual in the shop. On a bended knee, I then asked her if she would marry me. And I must have really done it well, because she said yes. And we eloped. We got married in Cape Town, just with her son as a witness, and one of my great mates married us. And she's a very good lawyer. And she very quickly disengaged that marriage. And within 6-7 months, I was on my own, and I thought, wow, that was interesting. Finished rezoning Port Elizabeth. And I thought it's time to come back to Johannesburg, but not before our classic December holidays at my brother's beach house in Plet. And in the beach house in Plet, he said to me, yeah, we have a 1st of January, him and I lunch, which usually is a very good thing. Usually involves cheers, happy Heritage Day, all of you. Usually involves a drink or 2. What would Heritage Day be without a bit of biltong? Fantastic. And some rooibos. Sloan Meat Market, don't miss it. Obviously, we're going to braai a little later. And He said to me, have I got any regrets in my life? I said to him, only one. He said, what's that? I said, I wasn't married to Bridget long enough and I don't feel the season is over. So the beautiful thing about South Africa and our diversity is we have some great winelands. And Plettenberg Bay had just got into the wine space, and we had probably had our third or fourth bottle of one of the local Bramptons. And I said, I'm going to ask her to marry me again. And he looked at me and he said, let's do it. Let's do it. I said, what do you mean, let's do it? You're not involved. I'm going to do it. So I phoned her. I said, it's a yes, no question. Will you marry me again? She said, yes, but. And I said, okay, but what? She said, but we're not eloping, but we're going to have a big wedding, and but all our family will be there. I said, okay. I said, that works for me. And she said, we're not going to do this like we did it the last time. Okay. I didn't realize that meant I needed to have a 6-bedroom house again in Bryanston. I needed to be a member of the country club again, but we did have a magnificent wedding at the country club, September. And again, I should have known it, because again, she didn't take my surname. And but this time I did manage 11 months before she said, I can't cope. And she went off. So yeah, Stella, Bridget is a very wise woman. She's one of the wisest women I've ever met.
Trevor, I'm afraid we're going to have to ask you to press the pause button if you don't mind. We're on sort of 25 minutes to the top of the hour already. So it's been a fantastic story so far, and hopefully we can pick it up tomorrow morning, if that's okay with you, if you're available, and finish it off then.
Second kick, why not? Let's have a go.
Good, excellent.
Trevor, we're loving it, and really looking forward to chapter 2. So thank you.
Thanks, guys. Have a great Heritage Day, all.
Thanks.
You too.
You too, Trevor. That was amazing. I loved it. See you tomorrow.
Ciao, ciao.
All right. Cheers, everyone. Thanks.